So welcome to Veritus Group's webinar, Getting to Seven Figures, How One Transformational Gift Can Inspire More. I'm Rebecca Huron, the Director of Content Marketing and Learning here at Veritus Group, and I'll be working behind the scenes a little bit, but also taking a moment to be in front of or on the webinar with you all as well today with Diana. So I'm excited about that, but wanted to make sure that you all had an idea of how this webinar system is going to be working before we get started. Just because of the number of participants that we have today, we can't take your questions out loud, but we would love to hear from you. So if you could do me a huge favor and make sure that you are putting any sort of questions that you have that you would like us to address in the Q&A box, that will help me keep track of those throughout the whole conversation. We would love for you to use the chat. If you've just joined us, people are introducing themselves over there. We would love for you to do the same. And you are welcome to use the chat to be connecting with other people on the webinar today. But it's not easy for us to track the questions in there. So questions in the Q&A box, conversation in the chat box. And if you do that, that will help us immensely. We will try to take as many questions as possible at the end of the webinar, so be sure to stay on for that. And then I also wanted to just mention, because we always get this question, if we're going to be sending a recording. The answer is yes. You will get a recording link and a copy of the slides in an email tomorrow, so be on the lookout for that. And then if you have any issues accessing that, you can feel free to reach out to us, and we're always happy to help you. All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started, and I'll just do a quick kind of further introduction of myself here. As I mentioned, I'm the Director of Content Marketing and Learning. I've been with Veritus for almost 7 years, which is kind of unbelievable to think about, but it's been a very fun journey. And I was actually trained by Veritus when I was in MGO before joining. So I've known Veritus and been part of the community for longer than that. So very excited to be with you all today. And just as a fun fact about me, I'm a very avid gardener and Latin dancer. So those are my two hobbies that kind of get me up and away from my computer. So I would love to know if any of you are also gardeners or dancers as well. So, but I'll pass it on to Diana for her introduction.
Thanks, Rebecca. I've been with Veritus for coming up on 11 years. My title is Senior Client Experience Leader. That's one of those longer ones. Senior means I'm older, and I've been around a little while. I spent 32 years myself as a frontline fundraiser in one way or another. But in terms of my life outside of Veritus, I like to run. I was off, not doing so well for a while, but I'm back on track running. I'm going back to learn French, since the last time I did it was in high school, and I won't tell you what decade that was. Love working with the coaching work with all the clients that we have, and just feel privileged to be a part of their journey as they're helping donors make a difference in the world.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Diana, and I'm just excited to be doing this with you. So before we get started on today's topic, and Diana is going to be telling you just the most fantastic and wonderful story here in a moment. But I know that some of you are probably familiar with Veritus, and some of you may be a little newer to us. So I just wanted to make sure that you all got a little bit of information about who we are and the approach that we take in our work with fundraising. So we are really passionately relationship focused and grounded in a data-driven approach. I think this dynamic is so critical, because it gives you the system and structure and the disciplined approach to really build meaningful relationships with your donors and partnerships that are going to be long lasting. So I think that dynamic is one that really is a powerhouse in how we are able to help our clients and participants in our courses really transform their work with donors. And on top of that, we have a vision to help nonprofits of all sizes create a culture and approach to fundraising that will really help them in these transformational relationships. We accomplish this through a focused strategy and an approach for both major gifts and mid-level. Over the years, we've worked with thousands of nonprofits through our consulting work and our online academy, and analyzed millions of donor records. This has really framed our strategy and the approach that we take to really help organizations get the buy-in they need to be successful in this work, focus on the right areas and the right metrics, really improve revenue per donor, increase net revenue for your programs, all the good things that everyone on this call, I'm sure, is wanting. So that's really how we get to that approach. And we've gotten to work with some really fabulous organizations over the years. This is just a small sample of them, but these organizations have really been valuable partners with us in getting to a really refined strategy that is helping even more nonprofits every day for all of our resources. So that's a little bit about us, and I am going to pass it over to Diana to really kick things off with a fantastic story.
Thanks, Rebecca. And I'm sure that that $4.7 million number caught your attention. That might be the reason you joined us. But this is an incredible story. And stick with me because there's a lot of details. So I'm trying to distill it. One of our clients received a large first-time gift of $100,000 in mid-2022, right around then. And all they had was the name and the address that the donor had provided that came with the check. They immediately got the personal thank you letter and the receipt out, and they requested a phone or an email information so they could go deeper. Crickets. I'm sure you've all been there. Crickets, crickets, crickets. So when there was no response, when I was talking with the fundraiser about it, what we did was we brought up LinkedIn. Imagine that. And we poked around a bit and we found what we thought was the most likely profile for that person on LinkedIn. And she took a shot of connecting through LinkedIn, and bingo, it resulted in a response. That began a dialogue all through the fall, and it ended up resulting in the donor agreeing to a face-to-face meeting in January. So the fundraiser flew there in January to meet with the person. At that time, she really was able to learn more about who he was, what he cared about, that he had had a recent inheritance. He set up a foundation for that. He decided to continue his career, not stop working. She also learned some specific things about their work that he was interested in. And then also, this is a critical thing, he really likes collaborative work. And that's going to come into play again and again in this journey with this donor. So from here, we're now in a new year. There's some back and forth over the next 4 months, including the donor coming on site, meets the executive director, the board chair comes in a Zoom call, a lot of subject matter expert stuff at a pretty high level at that point. And they began talking about 2 research projects, one of which works across multiple disciplines, collaboration. Then from that, he said, go ahead and send me 2 proposals. And from the 2 proposals, he decided to fund both of them. So he went from $100,000 to committing to 2 $2.5 million projects. And on top of that, an additional $200,000 for operations. So that's how we get to the $4.7 million commitment from that one person. But that created a whole internal energy of the organization, because it was a big gift for them, and it was gonna move these projects forward in a huge way. So internally, now you've got the collaboration of the grant writer and the executive director and the funding, talking to the funding organizations they already work with and some corporate donors. And by fall of last year, so a year and a little bit from that first $100,000, that big commitment in the spring inspired additional commitments of $2.5 million, bringing this one project up to $5 million, or halfway to where they need to be for the full funding of $10 million. They're able to start, but that's pretty amazing how that works. But I do feel like this is a Ginsu knife commercial, I have to tell you, because wait, there's more. A year later, the same donor came back to make another $375,000 gift for the purpose of closing funding gaps on several research projects. So that collaboration idea came back up again, the thing that he really cares about. Then he committed to a $500,000 matching gift to inspire other donors, again, collaboration. And he's going to give an additional $250,000 in the new year if this is all successful. And he's not done. Back to you, Rebecca.
I love that story so much. And I think my favorite part of that story is that this client of ours that has had this experience is not some big, huge organization. It's a smaller organization. And like Diana was saying, this completely transformed what they thought they could achieve and what they thought they could do and what kind of gifts they thought they could get. And I think that is just so fantastic. So these types of gifts obviously take a really disciplined approach. They take a lot of work and strategy to be true to that relationship. And it can be challenging for some organizations to really be able to secure these kinds of transformational gifts. we've analyzed thousands of donor files, and there are some common trends that cause clogs in your pipeline and make it difficult for the fundraising team to really have meaningful relationships with donors, which will allow them to be able to, pursue these kind of relationships that can have a transformational impact on your organization. So there are kind of two main problem areas that often come up when we're looking at donor files. So donor attrition, I think almost all of us are pretty familiar with. You have a donor, the donor goes away. And we all, think about what is our donor retention rate and what does that look like. That is an important number and something you should be looking at. But what really kind of slides under the radar a lot is this idea of donor value attrition. So what is the value of that donor? And not just when they go away, but when they're decreasing their giving over time to your organization. And this is something that has a huge impact on your ability to grow and make a greater impact on your mission. And a lot of organizations aren't necessarily looking at this and viewing it in a regular way. So Caitlin, if you'll go to the next slide. When we're looking at measuring value attrition, this is kind of just an example of what this might look like. So in year one, we had all of these $10,000 donors, 11 on this slide. Some of them went up in year two, some of them went down in year two, some of them stopped giving entirely in year two. So what we're really looking at with the value attrition is those donors that stopped giving or decreased their giving entirely over the course of time. And we're looking at this one group of donors that gave in year one and what is happening over the subsequent years with their giving. So we can see, because we're looking at it this way, that we have donors that are completely missing. They gave the 10,000 and they stopped giving entirely. And then we also have donors that maybe increased their giving and then went down, like donor number one. But all of these trends and these changes in giving are really important for us to be looking at, because ultimately that impacts the bottom line and that impacts how we are able to really accomplish our mission. So when we look at this in a couple different views, this is often kind of the conversation that we have with leaders in particular at organizations. They're looking at view one and they think year one, year two, I have a 21% increase year over year. That's great growth for a fundraising program. And really, I think there's not a leader out there that wouldn't be happy with 21% growth. But what happens here is that that's not telling the full story. So in view two, we're breaking that down to really see what is happening with the donors that were giving in year one, and then what happened with their giving in year two. And we're separating out the new money that came in. And what you can see here is that the value attrition here, the amount of value that was lost from year one to year two, is 49%. And that's significant, a significant change in the percentage of giving for that group of year one donors. But you couldn't see it because of the new money that was coming in year two. And that's why viewing things in this manner is so important. So why does this happen? Why do donors stop giving or decrease their giving? Well, it's because of this cycle that happens a lot in all sorts of organizations. It's this idea that, you made me aware of this need, I gave because you asked me to, and then you didn't tell me what difference that gift was going to make, and so I gave somewhere else. And that's what happens when you kind of go into that, red part of this cycle. And what we want to be functioning in is the blue section, where we tell them how their gift is making a difference and they want to help again, which is exactly what happened in the story that Diana told you at the beginning with this fundraiser. There was this opportunity, they connected with the donor, they told the donor how they were making a difference. There were a lot of other things going on in that scenario, but because of that good stewardship and that good relationship building, the donor wanted to give again and again and again and again, which is great. And what we want to see happen with these donors. So there are a lot of, other aspects of things that we see within organizations that can cause them to kind of be stuck in that red part of this cycle. So the first is that many caseloads are filled with donors who do not want a relationship with the organization. They are not interested in a deeper connection with the mission. Sometimes these donors meet the major gifts criteria, but were never truly qualified. And the way that we define qualification is that you've had a two-way engagement with the donor where they, there's been an indication that they want a relationship with you. And sometimes, these donors that get put on portfolios are just wealthy prospects or philanthropists in the area who have never really given to the organization or haven't given significantly. But somewhere, somehow they became on somebody's radar and somebody decided they needed to be on a major gifts caseload. And so having all of these unqualified donors on a caseload takes a lot of time and attention away from donors who really do want that relationship. And that's why it's so important to go through that qualification process. Another major issue we see often is that fundraisers have no clear plan or goal. So they're just unfocused, responding reactively, and they're not really thinking strategically about where they want that relationship to go. And then you also need to be able to understand your progress and have clarity about how your work is being measured and what it is looking like. Where does your caseload stand? How are you being evaluated? What are those metrics? And we'll talk about metrics a little bit later. But if you don't really have any idea on how things are being measured or clarity on those metrics, it can be really hard to understand where you are and what you need to be working on and where you need to be focusing.
Right. So what we want to really think about right now is what's the foundational principles that we want to build upon? Because transformational giving doesn't come out of nowhere. It comes out of it's Rebecca said before, structured system. So let's start talking about a major gift system that we've been using for well over a decade and have proven through our work with hundreds of organizations. And myself, I've probably worked with 250 fundraisers directly through Veritus on this. So one was, thank you, Caitlin. When you move into this upper tier of the pipeline, it's really critical to assess how donor-centered and relationship-centered your organization really is. Many orgs talk like they care deeply for the donor, but the systems they have in place are keeping them not really in that kind of space, but they're really organization focused. It's about them, what they want to do, what the org wants to accomplish, and it's not about the person who's giving. So as a gift officer, your job is to understand how your donors' passions and interests connect what they are and connect to them in those meaningful ways to the good work your organization is doing, so that you're a bridge between the donor and your program. That's your role. You're listening, learning, matching to the organization. You're the bridge. When we define a donor center, this is what we mean. This is not meaning that the donor is driving what your programs or solutions you establish. Those should be developed in partnership with the community you're serving, the support of experts, and with your staff who are leading programs every day. But with the program, but what programs matter to the donor, or like the story I told either, the way you work, like that collaborative nature of the research projects appeals to donor. That's what you're looking for to match. You're trying to make that match. So let's talk a little bit about the structure here. The structure of the program is designed to address the last few slides we just talked about. Again, the basics matter. The key components of structure are having a dedicated major gift officer who is working with an assigned caseload of donors to learn those donors' passions and interests, qualify them, what Rebecca said before, getting to a two-way engagement and agreement that they want to connect, and ultimately to secure net revenue. So above whatever cost it takes to raise the money, you want to be raising revenue that helps the organization. We recommend that caseloads be maxed out at 150 qualified donors in the major gift space. And lastly, your gift officer should be creating a 12-month communication plan and have a revenue goal for each and every donor in your caseload. I know that in and of itself is a big shift for a lot of people. You're used to having a goal for your caseload, but not a goal for each donor. And your plans tend to be more generic with a few exceptions. So we want to be focusing on a 12-month communication plan. So when we talk about the qualification cycle, it really does take commitment on the part of a gift officer to move through this, particularly if you're starting with a brand new caseload. You just walked in and you're given a group of donors that nobody has reached out to. And our system you can go ahead and run those through, Caitlin. It's all right. Our system was originally inspired by proven sales strategies and includes 7 main touch points. Now, that's an average. You'll have donors that you qualify fairly early in the process, and others, after you're done with the 7 steps, you may want to hold on for attempt more for them to see if you can make a connection. You'll notice that some of the touch points have follow-up attempts in a couple of areas. And these follow-ups are really critical to the whole cadence and success of qualification process, because we don't want you to use any one tool like phone. We want you to mix it up. Phone, emails, put something in UPS, maybe link to a webinar. You want to do different kinds of connections, different ways to reach people, and you don't want a one and done. So you want to do things in sequence so that you get the donor's attention. You're competing with a lot of stuff out there. So that's why this strategy is followed. The other thing is to set your expectations, because when you're going through this process, it's very easy to get bogged down and discouraged by leaving voicemails and never getting a return call, which, by the way, it's not the donor's job to call you back. It's actually your job to call back. I'm sure you know that, but you get voice messages, you get no's, but if you have the right expectation, that really sets this all in perspective. So in general, we find that 1 in 3 donors will say yes, engage with you. That means 2/3 aren't. Generally speaking, about 1/3 will actively say no, and another 1/3 won't really respond to you. So you want to stay with that 1 in 3 that says yes to engagement, and now you can go somewhere. The other piece to this is tiering donors. It's part of our structure to look at your donors and identify them in financial categories, if you will. Tier A, B, and C, with tier A being your highest potential capacity, engagement, those kinds of things, where you're going to have the greatest economic impact. But this is fluid. What you think today might be different than what you think 6 months from now. You might have learned something new about capacity, that sort of thing. So it's not like you make this decision on January 1 and you never change it. You're constantly looking at the engagement level with your donors and what you're learning about the capacity and their interest in their giving, and you can change this around. So in terms of the caseload mix, this next slide is a bit of is sort of what it looks like. Now, it won't be exactly even like this. We did this so it's easy to grasp when you're looking at it. But you can see the tier A is 10 donors out of the 150, but it's 50% of the effort. And you can see as you go across that reddish row, your interaction is going to be very personal, very strategic. And this is where the 6-figure gifts and your retention, your repeat comes from. Tier B is a slightly less economic value, maybe 40 donors or 40% of your effort. And Tier C, maybe 100 donors and 20% of your effort. When you get to Tier C, it's less personal, a little more tactical, but your objective is to have people move through the pipeline. So a person who's a Tier C today, 2 years from now, may be a B or an A. So just want to make sure you're thinking that. But this really helps you focus your time well. And we also highly recommend creating a budget or a management goal. Whoops, sorry, I skipped over something here. This sequencing helps you put the best amount of time, your best or your strongest efforts in at the right place. So then we want to take these same donors who are ABC and we want to create individual goals. And we mean that literally, a goal for every person, not a group goal, a personal goal. And you want to take into consideration past giving, any other information you might know about the donor's giving trends. Maybe you've learned they have a donor advised fund or they give through a community foundation, or you're learning they're hitting an age where maybe an IRA gift is possible. And you can see in this example, there's a donor whose business is hurting, so their goal is lower 1 year over the other. And there's a note about a special 1-year gift, so there's clear documentation on why that goal is lower. The point is, not every donor will increase giving year over year. You need to know their story, where they are in life, and you need to set goals that make sense. So we want you to create a budget or a management goal, and that's the one that gets submitted to finance that they're banking on, if you will. But we also want you to set an aspirational goal where you're dreaming big about that donor and begin to pursue that. And when you set your sights there, things start to move in that direction. So another part of our system is creating a 12-month plan. You'll get this to watch again, and you'll get a PDF, so don't feel like you have to scribble notes here. But these are just two examples of a 12-month plan. And you can see, like in the first example, there's an ask in July and there's an ask in October. And with this donor, Chris Lee, there's a $500,000 goal over time for that piece. And you see all the different kinds of touches that are in there, and you can drill down on that later. On the second one, Betty Richards, $250,000 goal. And there are two asks here as well. So sometimes there's like a commitment that they typically do every year, and maybe it's $10,000 for a particular baseline program. But now you want to ask them for an additional $250,000 for a special project, or it could also be operating. But you get the point, and you can look at this in detail later. What's important there is, sorry to back up just a second, Caitlin. Making this plan can seem overwhelming. So start with your top 10 to 20 donors. Spend a lot of time on those donors. Then take a step back, look at your other donors, and you can kind of plug and play, because these ideas that you're using at the top end, you can use elsewhere in your caseload. So that suddenly becomes much more manageable to accomplish, whether you're using an Excel spreadsheet or if you're using it out of your CRM. It's easier in an Excel spreadsheet to plug and play and then transfer that to a CRM, but you'll come to a plan fairly quickly. You can really do this, the skeleton, not all the details, in one business day. You're not going to have exactly everything you want to do, but you may say, I want to do a subject matter expert thing. I want to do an impact report. And that really brings up the next slide, is the kinds of touch points that you have available to you. We have the types down on the left: problem or gap, ask, thanks, why mad, which you made a difference, and personal connections. And personal connections are just that, something, that they love fishing, or that their oldest son is graduating college, that kind of thing. But these why mad, you made a difference. There's a whole lot of different kinds of things that you can do. You can report on the project. You can tell the transformation story of one person, or a stream or a river, being reclaimed, if you will. You can use subject matter expert information that's really highly technical and get that to your donor. They might not read it, but they might appreciate that you thought of them. So what you want to do is take these variety of touch points and methods of delivering touch points. So remember, you've got phone, mail, texting, email, Zoom, a FaceTime if it's appropriate, webinars, personal meetings, group meetings, tours, all of these options as they apply to your organization. Try to deploy as much as that you can with each donor, because you're going to learn over time what they care about. And then each of these touch points can be a way to deepen the donor relationship and build trust. We're focused really on transformational giving here, but all these things that you do, tier C through A, is what creates your pipeline to get to the transformational giving. Meaningful connections are the ones that move the donor's relationship forward. You don't always know what's meaningful when you start. You could try something and you just don't know, but then the donor responds and you engage. Now you understand that that's meaningful. So you want to have a right intention when you build your plan, and ask yourself, why am I sending this? Now, all around this, from a Veritus methodology that we talk about, is using what we call permission-based asking model. It's an incredible conversational tool that honors and respects your donor and allows you to stay aligned with the donor and reminds you to return to celebration in your conversations. We have other training that's specifically around this, but this particular approach helps to take the pressure off of you and the pressure off the donor to be authentically engaged in conversation as you go through the process, to connect with them where they are, align to make sure you're both agreed that what you want to talk about, when you're in Be Curious, asking deep, generous, thoughtful questions to learn more. When you ask, it could be to be on the board, it can be whatever, and come back around. So this is a really helpful way to frame donor conversations, whether it's to ask for a gift, to join a board, anything you could use there. Now, I want to bring it all back together. And next slide there, Caitlin, sorry, I didn't make that clear. I want to bring it all back together to talk through your objectives, a Major Gifts fundraising program, because there are things you're trying to achieve. I've been talking about the system and structure, Rebecca did as well, on how we do Major Gifts. This is why. Your objectives are to learn the passions and interests, yes, I'm saying it again, the passions and interests of your donor, to increase net revenue from major gift donors, creating plans for transformational giving. And ultimately, you're developing strong, meaningful relationships with your donors that are built on trust, just like the story I told you at the very beginning of our presentation. That's the key right here.
Awesome. Thank you, Diana, for that. And kind of another piece of this that we wanted to talk about is, you have your system and structure, you know why, you know kind of what you're focused on and what your goal is. Now, how do you measure that in a meaningful way? And I'm gonna like try to put on my Jeff hat or step on his soapbox a little bit because he's so passionate about this. But so often we in the fundraising world, and especially leaders, can just get really stuck on activity metrics and how many face-to-face visits have you had, how many phone calls have you made, how many emails have you sent. I remember hearing one story where there was a fundraiser that was, had just the most ridiculous metrics and was so frantic about it that they started, tagging face-to-face visits as saying hi at a gala event and being like, I got my face-to-face visit. It's like, no, you just went over and said hi. That's not quite the same thing. But because there was so much pressure around this metric, it was like, I got to just get them anywhere I can in whatever way I can, but it wasn't meaningful. It wasn't strategic. It wasn't focused on everything that Diana was just saying. So when we are thinking about measuring what matters, what we're really trying to do is figure out how to execute this system and allow you to secure transformational gifts from your organization, which requires a mindset shift around what we are measuring and how we are doing it. So you want to be really clear on your metrics, no matter what situation that you're in, and want to know how those are recorded in your database. It's really critical for tracking that you have a system in place. Even when we're talking about the meaningful connections and the kind of metrics that we're looking at, you need a system in place that allows you to understand what is going on with that donor, what is that relationship looking like, and be able to really show the success of the program and the work that you're doing with your fundraisers. So in our approach, we're kind of maturing the current thinking around how to measure donor engagement to create more meaningful, less transactional relationships and what the metrics are that allow you to do that. So as you can see in this chart, there are several differences here. And the main thing I want to call out is the meaningful connections, which is a term I'm sure you've heard Diana and I use several times so far. But that is the priority, or that is a focus over just a lot of different task or activity oriented metrics. And, obviously we see face-to-face visits as wonderful as well, but they, like in the example I just said, they can be somewhat meaningless. They can be something that doesn't move the relationship forward. And so what we want to focus on is what is valuable in the donor relationship, what is moving that donor relationship forward. And then, this is kind of just a really important distinction in the way that you think about your plan and the way that you think about your fundraising strategy from our perspective. And when you focus on meaningful connections and when you focus on working the plan and really committing to the relationship with that donor, that's when you are kind of opening your fundraisers up to be able to think strategically and meaningfully with the donors about what they can do transformationally. So it's also just worth mentioning that in your evaluation and your planning for your major gift program, I'm certain that you all are at very different stages with major gifts. You want to make sure that you have realistic expectations, both as a major gift officer and as a leader, of what you can see through this program. So if you're on this call and you are just getting started with a major gift program, first of all, way to go. We're super excited for you. And also it is very normal to have an ROI that is on the lower side. A 2-to-1, 3-to-1 ROI is very typical for a new program. As you move towards more maturity, you start moving into maybe the 8-to-1, 3-to-1 ROI. And that ROI will continue to strengthen as your program matures and as you continue to build these long-term relationships that will lead to transformational gifts with your donors. And I mean, here it says matures, 10-to-1 to 6-to-1 potentially, but I know, Dana, we've seen incredible, incredible ROIs that greatly exceed this when the major gift programs are really focused on building those deep, meaningful, and long-lasting relationships with their donors.
Yeah, a quick example. I worked with an organization that has, it's a big organization. They have 10 major gift officers, and the first year I worked with them, they were at 43.4 million. The next year they grew to 53.9 million, and then last year at 65 million. Same people, same basic group of donors, incredible change in the ROI. Okay, so now we want to talk about finding those people, the potential for transformational giving, finding the few. All right, so we're going to build on the system and structure that helps you create the plan for building these relationships. Next, how do you find them? So let's just get into some of the things that go on. What do we kind of get wrong, and what do we get right? When we're coaching fundraisers, there are a few misconceptions and leadership as well that we hear that you may also be thinking right now. These stories keep you from getting bold and courageous and giving your donors the opportunity to do the same. We talk about it in terms of you're making decisions for your donors. Stop it. I just rewatched something on Newhart, Bob Newhart, the comedy bit on Stop It. So stop it from Bob Newhart. You may be stuck in a mindset where you don't think you have donors who can make transformational gifts. So you're telling yourself that. You aren't creating longer-term strategic communication plans that would move you through a relationship with a donor to move to that way. You're only thinking in quarters or a year. You're not thinking longer term. You've convinced yourself your donors won't ever respond to a higher ask. Maybe you don't have something big and bodacious and inspiring to bring to your donors. That's a problem for sure. Or you're stuck in the belief that your donor will just keep giving their annual gift no matter what you do. And I just was talking to someone today with a donor who's been giving $10,000 a year pretty consistently. And we just talked about if they'd be open to the gift office is going to broach the donor if they open to a $400,000 investment in something new that the organization needs. That took a push to think, I'm the one who keeps them at 10K, right? So let's talk a little bit more about transformational giving in depth. You want to remember that securing that level of gift requires a strong relationship with the donor. Even though that example I gave you was fairly short in time, it was not short in terms of depth. They developed quickly but deeply over that time frame. You're not going to be doing, generally speaking, a transformational gift plan for a donor you don't know yet. You also need to have two-way relationship of trust building. The donor needs to come to trust the organization. If they give a gift, it's going to be used well. And so that reporting has to happen. And lastly, you need to make sure you're working closely with program and finance, because you do want to ensure that if a gift is made, that you're actually going to use it and it's going to make the impact you want. Don't pursue a large gift if you're unsure your organization can actually use the gift. Meeting these criteria takes time because building relationships takes time. Trust takes time. These things don't happen overnight. Now, so if you or someone, let me reword that a little bit. If you are struggling here, take a step back and make sure you're identifying passions and interests first and building that trust. That said, things can take off quickly, like I said before, but it does require that depth in the relationship. It takes strategic, meaningful conversations to build on the donor's interest. We keep going back to that, the donor's interest in the organization and the difference he or she wants to make in the world. Where those things come together. So related to this is donor offers. It's very difficult to pursue a transformational gift if there isn't a vision, if you don't have a meaningful donor offer to present to the person who's considering the investment. In our approach, a donor offer includes program cost and a percentage of the overhead, because nothing happens in your organization if you can't handle the overhead. If you can't pay your light bill, your water bill, if you can't pay the driving to get somewhere, none of this happens. So don't discount that like it's the stepchild. Nothing against stepchildren, but think about that. You can't do anything without overhead. You need to educate your donors to bring them along with that. The organization, in my example, had clear projects with funding gaps that were identified, and they built overhead costs into the project. They do that automatically. And they told the donor that in the conversation. Your donor offer needs to be specific and aligned with the donor's passions and interests, saying that again. And you and your leadership need to collaborate with finance and program to be able to break down the program needs into compelling offers that have a believable solution with a specific price tag. So the person I talked about before, going from 10K to 400, there is a particular project that they need to have happen. It's pretty important for the organization. So they're drilling in to that specific. All right. So now we've talked about that. You're ready to start planning for transformational donors. There are some key things to think about. Who are these people? Right? You're saying, Diana, who are these people? Can I get that guy? Look for donors that currently give 2 to 3 times more than the average major gift in your file. You're going to find them pretty quickly. They're likely right in your tier A group if you've taken the time to do that. Next, you want to create a 24 to 36 month strategic plan. So you want to begin thinking long term. Normally you think in 12-month increments, but here you need to begin to think about it in the longer trajectory. You want to think about, how am I going to build up those relationships to be more deep? What do I need to do to demonstrate trust over that time period? So step 1 is, if they've already given you a gift, have you reported back? Start there right now. All right. Throughout the process, you'll continue to ask them for support. Please do not make the mistake of saving a donor for that big gift. It's far less likely a donor is going to go from 10K to 1 million. Build up to larger amounts over time so the donor knows that you know how to handle larger gifts, that you're a good steward, that you're reporting back. I have a gift officer who had a donor who gave $25,000 for several years. Then they went to $70,000. Then he brought $70,000. Then he brought them a proposal for $675,000 that they committed to. And then this year brought a proposal for $3 million, and the donor committed to it. By the way, the wealth rating showed a capacity under 25K. They just committed $3 million. The money sits in a DAF. It's not searchable. So something to think about. And remember, there's no transformational gifts without showing the impact of the donor's current gift. Remember, I said that. Have you reported back? You need to stop right now and think about these donors and make sure you've done the work. And if you haven't, step in and do it now. It's never too late to say thank you. It's never too late to show impact. Even if it was several years ago, you can show how that gift, maybe the gift keeps on giving, because the impact of that is over time. So do that. You want to engage the donor beyond giving money. How can you make the donor not just feel it, but how can they have an actual seat at the table, right? Can you get their opinions, their feedback? Can they serve on a committee, on a board? Think through how the donor might want to get more involved. And then finally, be prepared with a transformational gift plan. If you're bringing a gift, an ask to a donor, how might that look for them? How could it be structured? Become prepared to be flexible in that. So you might ask for 3 million, and they might be able to write a check for 3 million right out, but they might say something like, I can do that, but it would take 2 years. You need to be prepared for that. They might say, some of it will come out of my donor advised fund, some of it will come here, or I'm selling a business. Be open and flexible for that is what I'm talking about. Because these transformational gifts often are cobbled's not the right word, but you get the point, cobbled together, maybe from various and sundry ways that they give. So I want to talk a little bit about building the elements, and I know we're coming in closer in time. This is a slide that you can come back to, so don't worry about capturing, everything here that's on here. We tried to highlight in red some key takeaways. This is a donor who had given scholarship funds in the past and was very interested in athletics and generally was attending football games, basketball games whenever possible. And over the course of time, this donor had done things like paid for the team meals, scholarship, that kind of thing. Learned that he might be interested in some additional funding. He was signaling, actually saying out loud, I would like to get more invested in this university. That led to a $300,000 commitment for a field house renovation in about month 4 of this scene that you're looking at. There was a lot of back and forth. He also then agreed to a $68,000 scholarship, a new one. He decided that in month 15. Then you get down to the bottom, month 25, a pivotal thing happened. The donor attended what they call their Athletic Hall of Fame when the field house was open. The person emceeing this mentioned the donor by name and his generosity. Didn't say the dollar amount, but talked about his generosity as an alum doing this. After the event, students spontaneously lined up to speak to him. This was a huge shift in his understanding of impact. He connected it to students in the here and now and the students to come. Real people were going to benefit. Then at the very next month, the gift officer was telling him about one of the guy's classmates who was talking about a multi-million-dollar investment in research for a faculty research project. This led to a conversation about this donor getting engaged in it. And when I completed my work with them, he just after I finished my work, he committed to that multi-million-dollar investment. So take a step back. Scholarship donor, funds athletic meals from time to time, a capital gift for a field house, another scholarship, boom, multi-million-dollar faculty investment in research. Who would have thunk it? Because we can pigeonhole donors. Oh, they're my scholarship donor. They're my capital project donor. They're my help the student donor. Look at that. Amazing. Really when you get this, take this and look back at that trajectory. Look at all the things. You're seeing some of these as future plans, and some of it he filled back in as what he did because he used our donor engagement plan. So the language changes tense, future and present and all that sort of stuff. This is what we're talking about. This can happen. And this is a 30-month scenario. All right. Back to you, Rebecca.
All right. Oh, it's so good. So many good stories. Thank you for sharing all of that, Diana. Just really, really rich. So we have lots of fantastic questions. We're going to get to those in just a minute. But first, I wanted to ask you all a question that if we had a way to teach you this system and structure in depth that would and allow you to really understand how to move into transformational relationships with your donors, would you be interested? And hopefully you say yes, because we have our next offering of the certification courses. Caitlin, you can switch to the next slide. Our certification courses for major gift fundraisers and fundraising leaders starts on August 26th. This is the last offering of this course for the year. So February of next year is going to be the next time that this is offered. So if you want to really learn the system and structure, be able to start thinking about this and implementing this as you're moving into the year-end season and kicking off your year, I would highly recommend joining. This course really does have it all. I built it, so I'm really proud of it, but it provides a comprehensive training. We have insight and information from all of our team members, our coaches like Diana, gives so much insight into this course and so much wisdom into it. So it's really fantastic. And we have both the major gift fundraisers and the managers and executives course. We also have a mid-level course starting at the same time. If you happen to be interested in that, they all run starting on August 26th. And we have just a quick note from somebody who has taken one of our courses, just speaking to the value of this information and how it helped her reprioritize, stay on track with her donor relationships, and connect with donors in a really meaningful way. So we would love to see that same thing for you, which is why we want to offer you a special discount for joining us today. So you can get $200 off the upcoming course. Any of the 3 certification courses, you can get this $200 off. And they start on August 26th. Again, you can use the QR code to get right to the page. We'll also send all of this information to you in a follow-up email so that you have it at the ready. All right. So now let's get into some of these questions. I saw them coming through and I was like, oh, these are so good. I'm really excited for all of this. So I'm just going to scroll back up to some of this. So we had a lot of questions, Diana, about how the donor's ability and capacity in the story that you shared at the beginning, the $4.7 million story, how that was measured, and kind of how to deal with major donors that just kind of keep giving at that 5 and 25 and 10, but don't really want to communicate or work with you.
Yeah. And that story that, it will never show up on a wealth indicator in that particular donor. His wealth came through an inheritance, and he put that inheritance into a foundation. So it's not his personal money anymore. He could have made other choices, but that was his choice. But it was through the conversation that the donor revealed what they want to do and how they wanted to do it and what they wanted from the organization. in terms of reporting and engagement. So that donor was very upfront about that. The other case I mentioned where it went from 25, 25, 70, 6, whatever it is, to 3 million. Over that's a longer relationship. And gradually the donor did reveal more, but they did not know about the 3 million capacity until they took the step to dream about it and say, would you be at all open to that? So again, the wealth section wasn't there. The rating didn't support that, but it was the conversation that gave them the confidence to move forward. And they said, by the way, are you open to a conversation about a significant transformational gift? So the donor knew what was coming.
Yeah, that's really important, being, open and upfront about what sort of conversation you're coming to the donor with. We did also have a question, for those donors that maybe get disqualified from a caseload, they don't engage in the qualification process. Is there a way that that an MGO or a fundraiser can kind of keep engaging with those donors that doesn't detract from the relationship building? Or, have you seen any strategies that are helpful with that?
That's a good question, because the reality is you don't want them to just float away. On your own caseload, as your tier A matures, you're not going to be able to sustain that over time, but you could keep some people potentially as a tier D and maybe reach out 3 times a year or something like that, if you can manage your time. If you have administrative support, that person can tee those things up so it goes out under your signature, but they're doing the background work. If you have a mid-level program, those donors could go to mid-level where they're going to get some personal attention there. And I've worked with a few organizations that the critical mass of these kinds of donors had grown to the point where they hired a stewardship officer whose job was really to steward these people. But that way the major gift officer is focusing on increasing revenue. So there are a couple strategies there. Some would take an investment of the organization and personnel, and some are just thinking through how you use your time. But be careful. The more robust and deeper you go with tier A, you're going to have to release some of that, but also hopefully at that same time, you're making a case to bring on another major gift officer, because that's you need to show tipping points there.
Absolutely. We did also get a question just to clarify about the tiering and whether or not tiering is only for qualified donors. So yes, when you go into the tiering, that's after that qualification process has happened. So qualification happens first. That donor engages. Your next step at that point is to tier them and kind of work them into your caseload and start building out that individual goal and the communication plan that Diana walked everybody through.
Yeah, if you're in the qualification process, you're going to be strategic with your time. So you kind of effectively do a pre-tiering, if you will, based on giving amount and recency and those kinds of things. But you don't want to solidify that tier until you really know where your caseload's falling out. Like, does tier A start at 50,000 or does tier A start at 10,000? You don't know that up front.
Absolutely. That's a good point. So we also had a question about the aspirational goals component and whether or not every donor on your caseload should also have an aspirational goal, or is it okay if their budget and aspirational goal are essentially the same?
Yeah, I mean, you want to be careful that you don't fall there. But if you really are trying to track your management goal and your transformation goal, every box needs to be filled with something, or else it won't tally up. You won't know the low and the high of what you're reaching for. But that said, maybe it's a modest increase. Aspirational does not have to be 100,000 more. You may be wanting, say you're on the front end and your donor level is 2,500 for major gifts. Maybe it's a modest increase to 3,000 or 5,000. That's still aspirational for that donor where you are. So don't let the word aspirational make you think it has to be $1 million. No. Each individual situation is different.
That's a great reminder. We did have a question that I think is really great, and you did speak to this a little bit, I think, in the transformational giving portion, but the question is around multi-year pledges. And for donors who have made a pledge commitment, maybe they have committed for 3 to 5 years to this pledge and might not want to give another gift, or that situation might come up. So can you speak a little bit more to how we coach around that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if you go back to the one that went from the 50 to 50 to 70 to 675 to 3 million, that 675 was a pledge. And in a conversation with the donor, things had begun to really mature around a concept. And so the question to the donors was, you've made an incredibly generous commitment. Are you opening to considering this? Because I think this is exactly what you have wanted to do. That's a big trajectory. But say somebody's in a multi-year commitment and you want to ask for something comes up that's smaller. Rebecca, you've been incredibly generous with your giving, and your commitment over the next few years is so helpful. Something came up that I'd be remiss if I didn't bring it to your attention, because you may want to explore this. It's all in the framing. It's not what have you done for me lately? It's in the framing. Does it really match where the donor is? Ask if they're open to talking about it. You're not telling them to do anything. You're asking to engage.
So important. So this question is a little bit around the touch points piece of the system and structure that we talked about. So for this particular individual, their programs are all overseas. They work a lot in war-torn countries. It's not exactly a place that you're going to bring a donor. So what are some ways that you can still connect to the donor to work when maybe it's not easy for them to get right into your mission?
Yeah, that's a good question. I do work with some people who work internationally, and while they can occasionally bring a donor overseas, it's a complicated process for a lot of reasons. Some things I've seen done very effectively is in the moment, taking a quick video with a phone and talking and saying, like, James, I'm right here. The such and such is about to start. I just wanted to let you to see who's all here, and we're so excited about this. That's a real story from a guy who did something in India. He couldn't even show the people because it was highly secure. All he showed was the empty seats that were about to be filled, and somebody committed to a $200,000 or $150,000 gift just based on that quick video. So think in advance who you'd want to communicate with on the field. If you go to the field, or if you have a program director who could do some quick photos for you or a quick video, anything that brings the donor into the moment. And if you can do it as close to real time as you can, that's part of the element. Do not take time to stop and edit the video. Let it be quick and messy. It's okay. Even if it's shaky, it's okay. The point is you thought of the donor, you're bringing them in, and that can help them see the impact. I had a gift officer who the donor couldn't or didn't want to go to some program thing. They were having lunch. They FaceTimed her colleague who was at the program, and he saw what was going on, and he was really touched and increased his giving. Just be creative. Think about it. How could I bring this person in?
Absolutely. So I think we have time for one more question. And I know obviously this topic of transformational giving gets a lot of wheels turning around. Well, I don't even know how much to ask for, what to bring. Is a donor going to be offended if I come in with a $400,000 offer? And, as Diana mentioned, wealth ratings can be very informative, but they can also be very misleading. So Diana, are there any specific things that you really recommend that people look at when they're trying to figure out, is this a gift that my donor can make, or how much can I ask my donor to give?
I think the key is to stop making decisions for your donors and have the conversation. You've been incredibly generous over the last several years. Here's something that's come up that's pretty large. Are you open? I would just love to bring this bold thing for you to consider. When you say things like that, it gives them the space to process what you're talking about. They can tell you back what bold means to them, or you could even ask that question as you think of your philanthropy. What do you dream of doing? What if you could give $1 million? Is that something you'd love to explore? Like, there are ways to ask the question that doesn't have the donor back against the wall, like, whoa, what just happened to me? You don't want that, but you want to engage and ask and trust them that they're going to talk to you like a real human being who cares about what you do. Remember, these are people who have already invested in your work. They're donors. They're not dispassionate bystanders. They have skin in the game, if you will, if you want to use some metaphors. Ask permission to ask.
Yep. What a beautiful way to wrap this up. Thank you all so, so much for being a part of this and for the fantastic questions. As a reminder, you will get a recording and a copy of these slides to go back to. That will come via email tomorrow. So be on the lookout for that. You can go back to this, look back at all of those great charts and information that Diana shared, and share this with your colleagues as well. But thank you all so much for the really important work that you're doing. You can also get $200 off using the QR code and the coupon code that's on the screen right now. We will send that via email. And if you have any questions at all, you can email us at academy@veritusgroup.com. And we really hope to see you again, hopefully in an upcoming course very soon. Thank you all so much.